We went to Columbia, South Carolina. Got to the auditorium. Now this is with the Classic Five, David, Eddie, Paul, Melvin, and myself. When we got to the auditorium, there was a rope right down the center of the auditorium.
A rope.
A rope. Blacks on one side, whites on the other side.
That's what the audience looked like back then.
Yeah.
Wow.
When we got there, we said, you got to be kidding, really?
Otis Williams has spent decades in the public eye as the last living founding member of the Temptations. Now, at 82, he's finally opening up about a deeply personal secret he's kept to himself for years. Fans have long been curious about the pain and struggles the group faced, especially during the height of Motown's success. According to those close to Williams, this new revelation could completely change how people perceive the group's story. Why did he stay silent for so long? And what does the secret mean for the legacy of the Temptations? Join us as we uncover the truth. Otis Williams has finally decided to share with the world. Temptations, Untold Story. At 82 years old, Otis Williams finally shares the hidden truths about the Temptations that he's kept quiet for decades, as he recalls walking into a South Carolina auditorium with David, Eddie, Paul, and Melvin, only to find the audience physically divided by a rope with black people seated on one side and white people on the other, showing just how different times were back then.
We walked out on the stage because they were setting up the trussels and everything, getting ready for us to perform. But when we stood there and we saw black folks sitting right down front, they didn't have the tickets to sit down front. White folks had the tickets to sit down front.
These revelations shed light on the struggles behind their perfect harmonies, the tensions beneath their dance moves, and the personal conflicts that threatened the group while they posed for the cameras and fans. Otis realized music wasn't just something he loved, it was his path forward in life. Soon, he found himself connecting with other young men whose voices could fill a room and whose dreams matched his ambitious plans. Together with David, Eddie, Paul, and Melvin, they formed a brotherhood that would eventually become the Temptations, creating sounds that defined a generation. However, the reality behind their success wasn't as polished as their performances, marked by long nights on the road, heated arguments, and internal rivalries that constantly threatened to pull them apart. Williams often found himself playing peacemaker, especially when it came to David Ruffin, whose incredible talent was accompanied by an equally powerful temper that frequently caused problems within the group. The tension between group members was always simmering below the surface, ready to boil over at any moment, much like that rope dividing the audience in South Carolina. That particular night in Columbia became an illustration of the social challenges they faced while trying to share their music with the world, performing for an audience split down the middle. These memories help explain the secret Otis Williams has kept for so long. They demonstrate how the Temptations navigated personal clashes and profound social divisions while creating music that later brought people together, even in places where they once faced rejection, such as the auditorium in South Carolina. His stories give a fuller picture of the group, showing that behind their polished image were 5 strong-willed men trying to stay united in a fast-changing America. What many fans don't realize is how deeply these experiences shaped not just their music, but their relationships within the group. Could the pressures of fame have contributed to some of the issues that later plagued several members? Voices beyond the walls. Now, years later, Otis remains the last surviving member of the original group. His journey from a hopeful Detroit kid to a Motown legend wasn't easy, but it belonged entirely to him. Long before the Temptations became household names, Otis was just a teenager, finding his way through Detroit's competitive music scene. He had the passion and drive needed to succeed, even changing his last name to Williams from his mother's side because it felt right for performing. During this critical time, fate intervened, placing him in a perfect position to advance his career. Detroit thrived on connections, and Otis found himself meeting influential figures like Barrett Strong and Eddie Holland, who were already making a name for themselves, proving that dreams could become a reality with enough hard work and soul. Determined to succeed, Otis formed his group called Otis Williams and the Distance, approaching their music with serious ambition rather than just for fun. They developed a distinctive sound, built a following, and hungered for bigger opportunities. Their breakthrough came with a local hit that caught people's attention. But the real game changer happened during a routine performance at St. Stephen's Community Center. Though they were just one act in the lineup, something magical happened when they took the stage. The audience felt it, and more importantly, Berry Gordy felt it too. Gordy, who was already building Motown Records into a major force in the music industry, watched their performance with great interest. After the show, he handed Otis his business card and told him to get in touch if he was looking for something bigger. That simple moment would change everything. It was the opportunity Otis had been waiting for, and soon he and his group were ready to step into the world of Motown. Not just a record label, but a cultural movement where legends were made. How did such a difficult upbringing shape the man who would later stand on stages around the world? These early struggles would follow him throughout his life, influencing both his determination to succeed and the demons he would battle. Soul singer's rough start. David Ruffin had the hardest childhood among all the classic Temptations lineup members from the 1960s. Born in tiny Wynot, Mississippi, in January 1941, the future soul star lost his mother very young and grew up with little money. His father Eli was reportedly harsh and forced David and his siblings to sing in churches as a group. While his older siblings apparently suffered at the hands of their father, David and his brother Jimmy managed to stay in their father's good graces through their impressive singing abilities. Despite these hardships, David held on to dreams of stardom. His niece recalled how the teenage David would pretend he was performing on The Ed Sullivan Show, asking friends to applaud for him as he sang. For a boy growing up without a mother and with so little, pretending to be a famous performer was his main escape until he finally moved to Detroit in the early years, still carrying those childhood ambitions with him. Meanwhile, the path that would eventually lead David to the Temptations was being cleared unexpectedly. Original Temptations member Al Bryant was creating problems within the group. His difficult behavior, often made worse by heavy drinking, had become too much for the others to handle. Bryant's dismissal from the band in late 1963 would prove life-changing, but not in a good way for him. However, this departure created the opening that would eventually allow David Ruffin to join the group. What goes through a person's mind when they sabotage their success? The contrast between Bryant's decline and Ruffin's rise shows how quickly fortunes can change in the music industry. Band's downward spiral begins. Drinking wasn't Al Bryant's only problem. His attitude worsened as the group became more successful, according to Otis Williams in his book, Temptations. The situation turned violent in mid-1963 when Bryant attacked Paul Williams with a beer bottle after a performance. Somehow he stayed with the group because Paul convinced the others to give him another chance. But when Bryant caused yet another disruption at Motown's Christmas party that same year, the other members finally had enough. They fired him and soon replaced him with David Ruffin, who would help define the group's classic sound. 5 years after his dismissal, the remaining Temptations members ran into Bryant backstage at Detroit's Cobo Hall, and the encounter was deeply unsettling. Otis Williams described finding their former bandmate looking terrible, with long, messy hair, dark circles around his eyes, and ashen skin. Williams also noted the deep sadness in Bryant's words during their brief conversation. Bryant's life continued its downward trajectory, and he passed away from a liver cirrhosis on October 26, 1975, in Florida. He was only 36 years old. In a cruel twist of fate, Paul Williams, who had once been the group's only non-drinker, developed a serious drinking problem just as the Temptations were becoming one of Motown's biggest acts. The same man who used to lecture his bandmates about damaging their health through drinking, fell into alcoholism himself. Otis Williams suggested in his book that Paul's drinking might have begun during an affair with Winnie Brown, a hairstylist for the Supremes. Paul had married young and had 5 children, leaving him torn between his family obligations and his relationship with Winnie. Despite this theory, Otis Williams admitted it's difficult to identify exactly what drove Paul Williams to alcoholism. People close to him were stunned. Otis remembered how Paul had once been the kind of man who drank only milk, but somewhere along the way that changed drastically. He began drinking large amounts of liquor every day, and it wasn't just casual, it was constant. Watching someone go through that transformation was hard, especially for those who had known him. While Paul Williams's struggles were deeply personal, he wasn't the only member of the Temptations battling inner demons. David Ruffin, another key voice of the group, was also facing a downward spiral that would leave many wondering what truly caused the fall of 2 of Motown's brightest stars. Soul legends' troubled decline. David Ruffin's powerful vocals catapulted the Temptations to stardom in 1960, but his growing substance use cast a shadow over his remarkable talent. These problems began during that decade and worsened over time, leading to his first stint in rehabilitation in 1967. Years after the group's prime, Ruffin faced legal troubles when police discovered these substances in his possession, and he violated probation for being in possession of illegal substances in 1988, resulting in another rehab stay when he was in his late 40s. By his final years, Ruffin's dependence on substance had taken a devastating physical toll, with friend Linster Butch Merle describing him as a walking skeleton due to excessive substance use. Daryl Hall, who collaborated with Ruffin in the 80s, sadly noted that the singer surrounded himself with people who enabled his substance use rather than helped him overcome it. These relationships likely contributed to Ruffin's inability to break free from overdependence despite his immense musical gifts. Meanwhile, fellow Temptation Paul Williams battled his demons during the early 70s, struggling with both alcoholism and sickle cell anemia, which he kept hidden from fans. These health issues affected his performance abilities, causing erratic behavior on stage, and eventually leading doctors to discover a concerning spot on his liver during a medical examination in 1971, prompting Williams to leave the group for health reasons. Williams faced additional personal challenges during this difficult period, including a reported separation from his wife in 1972 and an alleged tax debt of approximately £80,000. These combined pressures, health problems, relationship breakdowns, and financial strain created an overwhelming burden for the talented performer who had once dazzled audiences with his singing and dancing abilities. After leaving the Temptations, Williams stayed connected with the group, working behind the scenes as their choreographer. He was also developing songs with hopes of beginning a solo career. Tragically, on the evening of August 17, 1973, Williams was discovered to have passed away, slumped in a car's front seat with a gun in his hand. He had reportedly left his girlfriend's home several hours earlier following a disagreement. The struggles of Paul Williams seemed to mirror a troubling pattern that affected multiple members of the legendary group during their careers. Could these parallel battles with addiction among the Temptations reveal something deeper about the pressures of fame and success in the music industry of that era? Through the tragedy. Though Otis Williams rarely took center stage as a lead singer on the Temptations' biggest hits, he served, and continues to serve, as the foundation of the legendary group. As a founding member and longtime leader, Williams described himself as the glue that held the Temptations together in a 2018 Rolling Stone interview. He maintained this crucial role despite facing significant personal hardships, including 2 failed marriages and the devastating loss of his only son, Lamont. His son, Otis Lamont Miles, worked in construction and was only 24 years old when he passed away in a workplace accident on August 8, 1985. This tragedy struck Williams at the heart, yet he found a way to channel his grief into something positive through his performances with the Temptations. In a 2023 interview with The Express, Williams revealed how performing helped him cope with his son's tragedy. He explained that while grieving internally, he discovered that bringing joy to audiences through music allowed him to transform his sorrow into something meaningful. Meanwhile, David Ruffin, the distinctive voice behind Temptations classics, continued struggling despite numerous attempts to rebuild his career, including a 1982 reunion tour with the group that ended early partly due to his unreliable medication-affected behavior. Tragically, Ruffin's battle with substances ended on June 1, 1991, when he passed away at age 50 after collapsing at a crack house the night before. Could more support and awareness have saved these voices that once defined a generation? Final glimpse before goodbye. In his book, Otis Williams described his last meeting with David Ruffin at a Las Vegas show just months before Ruffin's tragedy. Williams was shocked by his former bandmate's appearance, noting he looked sunken and emaciated. Though Williams had known about Ruffin's problems since the late 60s, he'd never seen him in such poor physical condition. At that moment, Williams realized Ruffin likely wouldn't live much longer, given how drastically his health had deteriorated. Eddie Kendricks, famous for his beautiful falsetto on hits like The Way You Do the Things You Do and Get Ready, was already struggling during the Temptations' 1982 reunion tour. Years of heavy smoking had damaged his voice, making it impossible for him to hit the high notes that once came so easily. Despite these vocal challenges, Kendricks continued performing live throughout the 80s, often sharing the stage with fellow former Temptations, David Ruffin and Dennis Edwards. Kendrick's health problems grew worse in the early 90s, leading to the removal of one lung in 1991. During this difficult time, he warned young people not to follow his path of smoking, a habit he'd maintained for 30 years. Sadly, Kendricks passed from lung cancer on October 5, 1992, at just 52 years old while in a hospital in his hometown of Birmingham, Alabama. The Temptations' first manager, Esther Edwards, later reflected on what made Kendricks so special as part of the group's classic lineup. She remembered his great tenor voice as captivating and noted how he attracted admirers of both genders, though women were particularly drawn to his style and presence. Edwards described his singing as having a sweet, melodious, captivating, tender sound that helped define the Temptations' signature harmonies during their most successful years. The tragic patterns of substance overuse and health problems seemed to follow these talented performers throughout their careers, cutting short lives that had brought so much joy to millions of fans. What might have been different if the music industry of that era had better resources for addressing dependency and mental health issues among its brightest stars? Controversy clouds. Final days. Dennis Edwards, the powerful voice behind the Temptations' psychedelic soul era in the late 60s and early 70s, passed away in Chicago on February 1, 2018, just 2 days before his 75th birthday. While his official cause of death was complications from meningitis, troubling allegations emerged in the weeks before his passing. According to the Detroit News, an emergency protection order filed in January claimed that Edwards suffered neglect at the hands of his wife, Brenda, during his final months. The protection order contained several disturbing claims, including allegations that Brenda took away Edwards' hearing aids, cell phone, and iPad. Even more concerning was the accusation that she attempted to suffocate him by forcing his face down into a bed. Edwards' daughter with singer Ruth Pointer raised additional questions when she stated that her father's doctors never mentioned meningitis to her, casting doubt on the official cause of death. Brenda Edwards firmly denied all accusations in a statement to the Detroit News. In her own words, she said, She loved Dennis, and they were married for 18 years, and that she would have never done anything to harm him. She mentioned that the allegations are false and defamatory and will be proven as such. Her defense proved accurate when officials later cleared her name in 2018 after finding no evidence to support the abuse allegations. Beyond this controversy, the Temptations' legacy remains extraordinary. The group influenced countless artists, including the Jackson 5, the Beatles, New Edition, and Bob Dylan. AllMusic critic Jason Ankeny praised them as one of Motown's greatest and grittiest vocal groups, with impeccable harmonies who tackled both lush pop and politically charged funk with equal flair. Their famous choreography, including the signature Temptation Walk, was crafted by Motown choreographer Charlie Atkins and group member Paul Williams. How might their pioneering sound and performance style have changed the course of popular music if they hadn't faced so many personal tragedies along the way? Musical influence across generations. The Temptations' music has been covered by many artists spanning different genres. R&B legends like Otis Redding and Luther Vandross recorded their versions of hits like My Girl and Since I Lost My Baby. White rock and reggae bands also embraced their songs, with Rare Earth covering Get Ready and the Rolling Stones performing several Temptations classics, including My Girl and Ain't Too Proud to Beg. The Temptations have earned significant recognition throughout their career. In 2004, Rolling Stone placed them at number 67 on its list of the 100 greatest artists of all time. The following year, they were welcomed into the Michigan Rock and Roll Legends Hall of Fame. Their contributions to music were further acknowledged when they received the Lifetime Achievement Grammy Award in 2013. The group's remarkable story reached Broadway in 2019 with the opening of the jukebox musical Ain't Too Proud. The show captured the attention of theater critics and audiences alike, earning 11 Tony Award nominations and winning for Best Choreography. This stage adaptation introduced the Temptations' music and history to yet another generation of fans. What do you think about all the tragedies surrounding the group? And do you believe Otis Williams ever get closure after all the losses he suffered? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.